From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Record-breaking prices. See what was recently paid for 18 pounds of ham and a wheel of cheese. As wildfires burn in Louisiana.
Most of the good grazing, it actually got burned in the fire.
Florida prepares for a direct hit from a hurricane.
Oh, it's like, get out. It's mandatory.
As EPA revises the waters of the U.S. rule yet again.
And it basically told the EPA and the administration that you're overstepping your bounds, you're outside your lane.
What the decision means for farmers and ranchers right now on AgDay.
AgDay, presented by Pioneer. What's next happens when blood, sweat, and tears meet rain, wind, and sun. Pioneer. What's next happens here.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The EPA has just announced its final rule that amends the definition of the waters of the United States. The agency forced to make some changes after a Supreme Court decision in May limited its power to regulate wetlands. Let's take a look at some of the key changes. Now, the rule would require wetlands be more clearly connected to other waters like oceans and rivers in order to fall under its jurisdiction. It removes what the EPA calls the significant nexus test from consideration when identifying tributaries and other waters as federally protected. It also revises the adjacency test when identifying federally jurisdictional wetlands and clarifies that interstate wetlands do not fall within the interstate waters category, and clarifies the types of features that can be considered under the additional waters category. AgDay's Michelle Rook joins us, and Michelle, the reaction from ag groups seems mixed.
Clinton, initial reaction by farm groups has been mixed, with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association stating the revised WOTUS definition brings EPA more in line with the Supreme Court ruling. Meanwhile, the American Farm Bureau Federation stated they still believe it is unfair to farmers and ranchers. EPA announced that despite the fact the 2023 rule was not directly before the Supreme Court in the Sackett versus EPA case, the decision made it clear that certain aspects of their rule are invalid. Therefore, the EPA and Army Corps have amended key components of the regulatory text to conform it to the Supreme Court decision.
The Supreme Court decision in the Sackett case was a big win. And it basically told the EPA and the administration that you're overstepping your bounds, you're outside your lane, and you need to get back in it.
Now, while Farm Bureau is pleased the significant nexus test was eliminated, they stated EPA chose to continue government overreach by ignoring other concerns raised by the justices, 26 states, and farmers about the rule's failure to respect private property rights in the Clean Water Act by only revising a small slice of the rule.
Really, the waters of the U.S. rule needs to be a rule that can stick, not one that we get passed back and forth between administrations. Farmers have to make long-term decisions. They can't do it with this ping pong back and forth on that rule.
There are no changes to the 8 exclusions from the WOTUS definition, including prior converted cropland or wetlands. Additionally, it doesn't affect the long-standing activity-based permitting exemptions provided to the ag community by the Clean Water Act. The rule goes into effect immediately. I'm Michelle Rook reporting for AgDay.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Another developing story we're following. Idalia forecast to hit Florida this morning as a powerful Category 3 hurricane. The storm first hitting Cuba yesterday, providing just a snapshot of what's headed towards Florida's west coast. There's concern that if the storm hits at high tide, storm surge alone could reach 8 to 12 feet in some areas and carry winds of up to 120 miles per hour. Now, store shelves were wiped bare, boats pulled from the water, and evacuations ordered.
Oh, it's like, get out. It's mandatory.
People that don't have any other way to evacuate, they don't have anywhere to go, there are shelters available.
And there's something else brewing in the Atlantic. Hurricane Franklin. Although Franklin is not expected to bring direct impacts to the U.S., it could create rough surf conditions along the east coast of the U.S. through the upcoming week. For the latest on this hurricane, we turn to meteorologist Andrew Whitmire. Andrew.
And all eyes are on the tropics for today, as Idalia going to make landfall on this Wednesday. And in fact, this will be the first major hurricane to hit the Big Bend of Florida since 1896. And yeah, definitely a very long time since they've had a major hurricane make landfall anywhere in the Big Bend region. And as Dahlia again does reach the U.S. For today on this Wednesday, likely going to impact again the Big Bend as a Category 3 storm, a major hurricane, and then it'll gradually start to lessen its steam, becoming more of a tropical storm as it does go up the Carolina coastline and then eventually headed right back out to sea as a cold front that is plowing through the Midwest yesterday will set up just on the other side of the Carolinas there, and that'll kind of prevent Dahlia from going up further up the eastern coast. What are we looking at for water amounts though? And some pretty impressive water amounts up around Tallahassee region, where they could be looking at over 5 inches of just rainfall. And of course, there's going to be a lot of wind with this, as well as the severe risk for some tornadoes and again damaging rain and damaging floods as well from Florida all the way up across the Carolina coastline here, even on as we go on into Thursday, before we again get that hurricane that will eventually go back out across the parts of the Atlantic as we head on into the end of this week. That's a look closely at that hurricane, but now let's check out our crop photo of the day. And boy, was it a terrific sunrise over into Nebraska. Yesterday morning, we shared a spectacular sunrise with you, and here's an equally beautiful sunset. And the cattle hopefully enjoying it too. I'll have your AgDay forecast in just a few.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Louisiana's governor getting a look at areas of the state hit by wildfires. The governor saying afterward that nobody alive in Louisiana has ever seen drought conditions this severe. Democrat John Bell Edwards adding he doesn't think it's ever been this hot for this long in the state. It's estimated more than 450 fires have burned this summer across the state, more than 50 wildfires ignited in a single weekend. This week in Louisiana Agriculture's Carl Wiggers takes us to Sabine Parish, the site of just one of those fires.
Waylon Salter is surveying the damage of his fence that stood no chance from the fiery blaze that stormed through these trees into his pasture. However, as Salter explains, this open field is where local and Forest Service firefighters could turn the tide on this wildfire.
Whenever the fire is in the timber, in the tops of the trees, it's almost impossible to do anything with it on the ground. You have to fight that from the air. But once it gets out in the open like this, that's what they're really trained to do, and they can get ahead of it.
Before the fire made it to his pasture, this is the ominous view Salter watched from his driveway on Sunday afternoon. Salter says his first thought was to take care of his cattle.
My main focus was getting the cattle out, of course, and I had a plan for that. It turned out to really not be that big of an issue, because once the fire got out here in the open, the fire department and the Forest Service, they got ahead of it really quick. And since then, a lot of it has been just hot spots, trees that have been on fire and they produce embers, and that's what some of this is over here from yesterday.
Salter says the conditions around his property have been so dry, but he was pleased with the amount of grass that he still had available for his cattle. This fire changed that.
Probably 30 or 40% of the pasture was still sort of green and palatable to the cattle. The rest of it has turned, kind of golden and brown. It's stockpiled, so they'll still graze it, but most of the good grazing, it actually got burned in the fire.
That's why he was especially thankful to walk out into this field Monday morning to see this hay barn still standing.
There's usually, almost always, a way around everything. Sometimes you get to the point to where there just are no options. Now, for instance, if that hay barn had burned with the hay in it, that would have been a wrap. It would have been time to call Superior and get the trailers over here.
For now, the cattle are soaking up the shade and recovering from a stressful few days. In Sabine Parish, I'm Carl Wiggers for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture.
Our thanks to Carl Wiggers and This Week in Louisiana Agriculture for that report. Now, new advancements continue to roll out from the industry this week. On Tuesday, Corteva announcing new crop protection products. First, Corteva launching Viatude fungicide in limited supplies for 2023. Now, it's meant for northern U.S. soybean farmers to help protect against white mold. The company says white mold is considered one of the most significant crop diseases soybean farmers face, and it causes millions of dollars in yield loss every year. Viatude fungicide has 2 modes of action and received federal regulatory approval in late 2022. It's also labeled for use in canola as well. Corteva also rolling out a new soybean seed treatment called Lumitrio. It's a 3-way premix fungicide with protection against common seedling diseases, Phytophthora, dampening off seedling blight, and seed and root rot. And John Deere introducing the 1 Series round baler. The The 1 Series aims to help optimize moisture and consistent bale weights while tracking it in real time. Farmers are able to read bale moisture, net wrap availability, and weight via a new in-cab display. It also automatically opens and closes the gate at the right time, eliminating that repetition for the operator. And there are 3 different options for pickups, including a high-capacity pickup, which can feed 33% more compared to previous models.
That's going to increase bale capacity of 80 plus bales per day. So really getting the performance out of that machine, the capacity of baling each day, so that customer can get home to their family faster or get that hay baled before it does rain.
These balers also have the option of net lift assist, net lighting, and a forage preservative system. You can read all about these products and the latest industry news over at agweb.com. Grain markets pull back on better than expected condition ratings. We'll talk Tuesday's trade coming up next. Is good cheese worth its weight in gold? The outrageous amount one queso connoisseur was willing to pay in the country.
AgDay is brought to you by Endzone from Farm Shop MFG, which allows you to rehydrate your soybeans from 10 to 13% on a 20,000 bushel bin. That's an extra semi-load added to your bottom line. Order your Endzone fan control now for as low as $3,300 while supplies last.
USDA announcing new export sales on Tuesday to unknown destinations, but it wasn't enough to rally grains. Michelle Rook has more in today's Markets Now.
A down day in the grains on Tuesday. Arlen Suderman with StoneX is joining us. And Arlen, the pullback in corn and soybeans, how much of that was profit taking versus these better than expected crop ratings?
I think the crop ratings were a lot of it. They kind of went down pretty much as I expected, but the market had bigger expectations. And frankly, I understand that. Last week was the hottest week of the summer for many areas of the Midwest. And so we did see quite a bit of deterioration in appearance of the crop, but at least the market expected that. But the ratings didn't go down as much as expected. It's interesting that the Pro Farmer yield estimates came out on Friday afternoon that were lower than the market expected. The market rallied Sunday night and Monday. The crop ratings came out Tuesday at not as much of a cut as expected. All these fund managers have their yield models, and that suggests that the yield that's being priced in by the market right now probably somewhere around between 172 and 174 on corn, and somewhere between 50 and 50 and a half bushels on soybeans.
Is that going to have to adjust lower, though, if we continue to see the dry weather that's predicted all the way through the end of the month?
Yeah, we saw the corn yield this last week drop about 2 bushels, according to the models, and we lost about 1/10 of a bushel on soybeans, so not as much on soybeans. And we'll continue to see that lost yield as we go forward, as long as we stay in this warm and dry pattern. Now, it's not as warm this week so far, but it's going to be warming up here by the end of the week. So as long as we stay in this pattern, expect us to lose yield.
And the wheat market didn't do any favors for corn or soybeans on Tuesday, down into some contract lows again. How much farther will the specs push this thing? Because demand continues to be a concern, doesn't it?
Yeah, until we see some interruption in Russian shipments or something that's going to remove Russian shipments or slow Russian shipments off the world market, I think we're going to be beholden to the record supplies they're dumping on the market. And even a friendly Stats Canada report was unable to support this market today.
Yeah, it was a pretty ugly one. Thanks for joining us. Arlen Suderman with StoneX, and that's Markets Now. We'll have more AgDay coming up.
Contact Arlen Suderman by email at arlen.suderman@stonex.com.
Looking at the water outlook here from the National Weather Service as we go throughout the first few days of September, and we're keeping it dry across much of the Ag Belt regions, but we are hopeful that we're going to start getting a little bit of a trough starting to develop up across parts of the upper prairie, up across Montana as well, and across the northern Pacific Northwest, and that'll bring some inundated moisture chances for those regions. Otherwise, it's pretty quiet across the lower 48. Again, the bulk of the moisture going to be down from a hurricane that will be along the eastern coast there, and we'll also have to watch kind of the New England coastline as well for some pockets of some heavier moisture chances. Otherwise, again, kind of staying quiet across the Plain States, Midwest, and Great Lakes states here as we round out the last few days of August and headed right on in to the first few days of September. Looking at the jet stream, we're looking to find any type of energy out there, and there's just not a whole lot ongoing. Again, we'll be watching a few systems trying to come on board across the Pacific Northwest that'll try to bring with it at least a few chances for some added moisture across the northern portion of the Rockies as well as the northern prairie. Otherwise, we're staying pretty quiet here as we head on right on into Labor Day. The bigger story is going to be the heat that's going to be returning. We saw it kind of shut off for parts of the Midwest, Great Lakes states. Well, that big dome of high pressure, well, it's going to expand. This upper level ridge is going to begin to work its way eastward across the eastern half of the country as we head on into Labor Day weekend and begin the first few days of September. Just kind of look at that massive ridge trying to shape up across the eastern half of the lower 48. Meanwhile, there's the trough as we developed that'll be developing up across parts of Labor Day weekend out across the western states here, and that's going to keep again the central and eastern half of the country pretty toasty as we head on into Labor Day weekend. Temperatures, though, for this Wednesday afternoon, keeping it very early fall-like comfortable weather up across the Great Lakes, New England coastline. But notice that heat building off to our south and west. Yeah, that's going to be the temperature headed across much of the eastern half of the country for Labor Day weekend. That's a look around the country. Let's take a look here at AgDay Select Cities. Tallahassee, again, all eyes on the hurricane, bringing with it lots of rain, thunder, and a whole lot of wind. High temperature 82 degrees. Going over to Springfield, Illinois, a little bit quieter weather thanks to high pressure. Sunny 78 degrees. And going over to Boise, Idaho, sunny, high near 80.
Scientists working to stop the spread of African swine fever have made a critical discovery, a gene in the DNA of pigs that is needed for the infection to happen. Now, the research carried out at the Roslin Institute in Scotland. Scientists looking at pig cells, editing each one to lack a specific gene compared to the others to see how the cells respond to ASF. Their analysis pointed to a group of genes that produce proteins associated with an immune response to infections. They were then able to determine a single protein that is essential for replicating the virus in cells. Their findings raised the possibility of amending that gene using gene editing to develop pigs that are resistant to the disease that has killed more than 200 million pigs worldwide. You may soon see bacon prices rising at the grocery store. That's because wholesale pork belly prices are nearing record highs. CNBC reporting they are up over 100% year to date. Experts say bacon prices and prices for pork in general are expected to go up. They say it can also be partially attributed to California's new animal welfare regulations, also known as Proposition 12, which went into effect on July 1st. It's also a time when bacon is in higher demand right now amid lower pork production. Now, prices for sliced bacon near the end of last week were 6% higher than a year ago. Now, if you think that sounds expensive, stick around. We'll hear about some pricey top shelf foods turning heads and lightening wallets today in the country. Check this out. In Kentucky, the State Fair's grand prize winning ham selling for a whopping $10 million at auction. It was a combined bid from former UN Ambassador Kelly Craft along with her husband and a bank. The ham weighed in at a little over 18 pounds and was produced in Lyon County. And the great thing, all that money goes to charity. Some of it will go to build 57 new homes for families that lost everything in the eastern Kentucky floods. And what is the most expensive cheese in the world? Well, a new champion has been crowned. That's restaurant owner Ivan Suarez making the winning bid of €1,000. That equals more than $32,500 US. He purchased an almost 5-pound wheel of Cabrales blue cheese at the 51st annual Cabrales Cheese Festival. The cheese is said to have been made using a mixture of cow, sheep, and goat's milk. It was manufactured at a family's factory in northern Spain. Now, the factory owner says the cheese was matured in a cave at an altitude of 4,500 feet and kept at a temperature of 44.6 degrees Fahrenheit for a minimum of 8 months. Now, the restaurant owner says his passion for the land and recognizing the work of the cheesemakers made him buy it. The previous record paid was set back in 2019 by the same restaurant owner. That seems like a lot of cheddar. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.